GE ignored the tsunami stones, the warnings at Fukushima. Residents of Aneyoshi, Japan, heed the warnings of their ancestors. They obeyed directions of wisdom found on the local stone monuments. Do not build any homes below this point, it reads. High dwellings are the peace and harmony of our descendants. Remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. Earthquake and the tsunamis devastated Japan. The village sat safely above the high water mark. The tsunami stone historic. Hundreds of such tsunami stones dot the coastal hillsides of Japan, planted decades or even centuries ago. They commemorate past disasters and warn residents of future ones. Living Japan means facing a long history of periodic and unpredictable earthquakes and tsunamis that follow them. An Aneyoshi village leader, Tamishige Kimura, praises his forefathers for putting a stone marker in place. They knew the horrors of tsunamis, so they erected these stones to warn us, he told the New York Times in 2011. Kimura, describing his warnings as a rule from our ancestors, which no one in Aneyoshi dares break. This particular stone in Aneyoshi dates back to the 1930s, after the village was devastated by the 1896 tsunami. When another tsunami struck, the village was moved uphill. The tsunami stone was put in place after this disaster and is credited with saving the town in 1960 and again in 2011. Many tsunami stones date back even further than the ones in the Aneyoshi. Having been erected some 600 years ago, some feature warnings to seek higher ground in the wake of an earthquake. Others give death tolls or mark mass graves. A few denote place names with clear messages. Other towns on the coastal came to ignore these historical warnings over time, and many suffered as a result. Some stones were even washed away by the last tsunami, presenting an implicit dual warning. The water can always go higher. And 2, even massive 10-foot high stones may not be able to resist its power. GE nuclear designs played Russian roulette at Fukushima. Worldwide, there are 87 GE designed reactors like the ones that exploded at Fukushima. 35 in the US, 25 in Japan, 7 in Sweden, 6 in Germany, 4 in Taiwan, and 2 in Mexico, 2 in Finland, Switzerland, Spain. The warnings that are left behind by ancient Japanese historians, hundreds of them left behind as markers to build higher in the mountains, and over a mile inshore. The tsunami stones' messages were ignored. Diesel generator buildings were underwater, but would not be able to be turned back on. Fukushima should have been prevented. If the Fuza GE engineer design team would have followed the ancient tsunami stones, would have warned the people to build up high and not down close to the ocean. There are hundreds of these ancient stones that gave warnings to the dangers of the flooding. Apparently the earth killers at GE did the opposite, cut out the mountain entirely to get to the nuclear power plant and closer to the ocean. I guess they wanted higher efficiency channeling water into its reactor, which is one of the main design errors that lead to multiple meltdowns that are still melting down today. Now, I don't want to make it seem that the Fukushima catastrophe could have been fully prevented. There is evidence that the nuclear plant took major damage from the earthquake itself, before the tsunami even hit the plant. But when you put the force of the tsunami on top of an already earthquake-damaged plant that is now inundated with water, it's a recipe for disaster. At least, if Fukushima Daiichi was high up on a mountain, the tsunami effects would have been prevented. Holes could have been drilled out of the mountain to siphon out radiation into containers. Absorbents creating layers of containment, making a gigantic filter catching as much of the radiation before entering the sea. Trenches could have been built and containment barriers strengthened between the sea, but now the cores are gone. Anywhere but containment. Most of it is in the sea, and some stays out in the air for thousands of years. There was and continues to be very little that can be done to contain the AWOL melted cores. Russian roulette is a lethal game of chance. GE places a single round of revolver. It's a 1 in 6 chance, spins the cylinder, places the muzzle against the Pacific Ocean and pulls the trigger. The gun was a nuclear plant, and the bullet was the vast amounts of radiation that continues to release at Fukushima. These defective, inadequately tested machines, they were installed in the backyards of communities from rural Washington state to upstate New York without the public's knowledge of their flaws. Bridenberg said he was assigned the task of evaluating data on the dynamic force that accidents could create inside the containment structures of the 23 GE plants that were in operation in the United States. It went to my boss in January 1976 and said, "If these numbers that we are generating right now are correct, we've got to shut these plants down," he said. I worked diligently on this until February 1976, when I became disillusioned and I resigned. In 1972, another GE engineer stated that observed weakness in the containment domes have not been considered in any containment design. In other words, GE engineers who designed the containments had gotten the math wrong, what they'd be expected to withstand. Unfortunately, they erred on the low side. The people living near these plants become human guinea pigs in GE's appalling product development research experiment, raising ethical questions about the way the company's brand of commercial nuclear power plants were introduced to the world. Meanwhile, residents of Aneyoshi will caution against ignoring the lessons of their ancestors. Technology and preparation can only do so much. Build higher to survive, and always read the Tsunami stone.